This video talks about the trade deficit in the United States. One thing that's popular in politics is for a politician to claim that they're a business person and therefore they are very astute at how to run the government. But one thing that's important to remember is that the U.S. government is not a business. And so there's not necessarily any problem with the trade deficit. An obsession with the trade deficit can make a business person bad at governing. Current Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said, "We have the biggest trade deficits in the world, while protectionist countries have trade surpluses." But is that a bad thing? When the U.S. ran trade surpluses during the Great Depression, and Mexico ran them in the 1980s, this was not a good thing. They occurred because there was a lack of foreign investment in the United States during the Depression, in Mexico in the 80s. These economies weren't healthy. Economists refer to the balance of payments. This appears on page 319 of your text. And it's an accounting truth. If there's a trade deficit, a country sells its assets, and there's more foreign ownership. This has to work out this way. According to your text, seekers of protectionism are often established firms in an aging industry that have lost comparative advantage. So protectionist countries grant protection to the firms mentioned. They wouldn't have advantage otherwise, but the firms are granted the advantage by the government. Trade deficits have little to do with economic health. An important note is that selling assets is much broader than selling goods. We talked a couple slides back about how a country sells its assets and there's increased foreign ownership. If the U.S. buys Japanese cars, for example, if U.S. consumers buy Japanese cars, which are goods, they must sell something, or we must sell something to foreigners in return. So one of the things we could possibly sell is actually an asset: treasury bills, rocket ships, or perhaps even Rockefeller Center. Thus, if we run a trade deficit with China, our economy is healthy enough to buy their goods, and it's attractive enough for them to invest in. That's an important point to make. If either our economy wasn't healthy enough to buy their goods, or our country wasn't attractive and there was no reason for China to invest, then indeed there wouldn't be a trade deficit, but that wouldn't be a good thing. Today, the United States economy is a nightmare conglomerate of interconnected enterprises. Consider this situation. When we're talking about interconnected enterprises and nightmare conglomerates, we're really talking about how an action can have an unintended consequence. So 14 or actually 15 years ago now, President Bush imposed steel tariffs. Well, consider what happened with some states. Pennsylvania at the time was a very big steel state. And there wasn't a great deal of manufacturing in the state that wasn't steel related. Although Pennsylvania by 2002 was getting into healthcare and other service type things. Meanwhile, Michigan made a lot of general manufactured items. So they used steel, but Michigan itself wasn't producing steel. Well, Pennsylvania won because now there were new steel tariffs. They made U.S. steel more attractive compared to foreign steel. But Michigan lost because the firms there had to buy lots of steel in the United States at expensive prices to make their items. Meanwhile, firms in other countries didn't necessarily have to buy the expensive steel. Economists often say, and this is a point I tend to agree with, that a growing number of people working in good-paying jobs increases U.S. GDP. The point we're making here is that simply bringing back manufacturing isn't necessarily a good thing, any more than bringing fast food in would be a good thing. Instead, the more the people who can go out and get a good-paying job in the United States, the more this increases U.S. GDP, and that's a good thing. Well, here's some credits about the article that this came from. It was entitled, "A Powerful Trump Cabinet Member is Proving a Point Economists Have Been Trying to Make for Years." And this comes from Business Insider on May 4th, 2017. Take care. Watch for the homework that comes out related to this. This is in the hybrid portion of the course. Take care.